The engines of armored vehicles echoed through the mist of northern France. It was June 1944, and the fields near Caen were scarred by fire and steel. Among the German formations rushing toward the front was a man whose name struck a curious mix of admiration and dread: Kurt Meyer. To his soldiers, he was Panzermeyer, the young and daring officer who seemed to appear wherever the fight was fiercest. To his enemies, he became a symbol of the relentless, almost mechanical efficiency that defined the Waffen-SS in its final desperate years. But who was this man behind the legend? How did a former police officer in his early 30s rise to command one of the most formidable armored divisions of the war? And how did his story come to reflect both the brilliance and the moral collapse of a generation consumed by ideology and conflict? The story of Kurt Meyer is not one of simple heroism or villainy. It is the chronicle of a soldier forged by the chaos of his time, a man whose rise mirrored the ambitions of a nation and whose downfall mirrored its ruin. If stories like these capture your imagination, make sure to like this video and subscribe. There are many more gripping accounts from history ahead. Kurt Adolf Wilhelm Meyer was born on December 23, 1910, in Yerxheim, in what was then the German Empire. The world around him was shifting. His childhood coincided with the aftermath of the First World War, a time of hunger, humiliation, and political turmoil. Like many young men of that period, he grew up in a society searching for purpose. After finishing school, Meyer joined the police service in the late 1920s. The police offered stability and hierarchy, but Germany itself was spiraling into chaos. The rise of the National Socialist movement promised unity, strength, and the restoration of national pride. In 1934, Meyer joined the SS, a step that would define his entire life. At that time, the SS was transforming from a small political guard into an elite fighting force. Meyer's discipline and athleticism quickly set him apart. He was transferred to the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, the personal bodyguard unit that would soon become a spearhead of the new military order. His early career was marked by ambition and daring. Colleagues described him as intense, intelligent, and ruthlessly efficient, qualities that earned him both respect and fear. By 1939, as Europe edged toward another war, Meyer was already seen as one of the most promising officers in the Waffen-SS. When Germany invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939, Meyer's regiment was among the first to cross the border. The campaign was swift and devastating. For many in the Leibstandarte, it was the first real experience of modern mechanized warfare. Meyer commanded reconnaissance elements that moved at extraordinary speed, cutting communication lines and encircling Polish units before they could retreat. His performance drew attention from higher command. He earned the Iron Cross Second Class for bravery, and soon became known for leading from the front, often exposing himself to the same dangers as his men. The following year, during the invasion of France, Meyer refined his reputation. His units were used for deep penetration raids, striking far behind Allied lines to disrupt reinforcements. In one operation, he captured an entire French command post through rapid maneuver and psychological pressure. To his superiors, he embodied the Blitzkrieg spirit: initiative, momentum, and fearlessness. Yet behind the victories lay a darker transformation. The Waffen-SS was no ordinary military formation. Its members were indoctrinated to see themselves as the ideological elite of the Reich. Meyer's effectiveness as a commander was inseparable from that belief. Discipline, aggression, and obedience were absolute. The lines between necessity and excess grew thin, foreshadowing the grim reality of the Eastern Front. Operation Barbarossa began on June 22, 1941. Meyer, now commanding a reconnaissance battalion, entered the Soviet Union with the Leibstandarte as part of Army Group South. The distances were immense, the resistance fierce, and the brutality of the campaign beyond anything Europe had seen in generations. Meyer's leadership again stood out. His fast-moving units often operated independently, seizing bridges and key crossroads ahead of the main body. He earned the Iron Cross First Class, and later the German Cross in Gold, for his actions in Ukraine and the Caucasus. By 1943, he was one of the youngest regimental commanders in the Waffen-SS. But the Eastern Front also left its mark. The campaign was total, no longer limited by traditional military codes. Villages burned, entire regions collapsed under scorched earth tactics. For the men under Meyer's command, survival demanded not only courage, but moral endurance. Contemporary records show that while he emphasized discipline and efficiency, the wider conduct of SS formations was shaped by ideological warfare that offered no room for restraint. As the tide of war shifted after Stalingrad, Meyer's division was withdrawn westward. Exhausted, reduced, but still battle-ready, it was rebuilt in France. There, in 1944, Meyer faced his greatest and final challenge, not in the open plains of the East, but in the hedgerows of Normandy. The Allied landings on June 6, 1944, marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. Meyer's new command, the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, was composed largely of 17 and 18-year-old volunteers from the Hitler Youth. They were disciplined, motivated, and utterly inexperienced. Meyer understood the psychological importance of leadership in such a force. He often appeared at the front lines in his armored car, rallying his soldiers under fire. His tactics, swift counterattacks, use of camouflage, and flexible defense, slowed the Allied advance and turned Caen into one of the most contested cities of the campaign. Despite his tactical ingenuity, the division was overwhelmed by superior numbers and firepower. The Allied air forces destroyed supply lines, and continuous bombardments left entire battalions cut off. Meyer's radio communications became increasingly desperate as he tried to maintain cohesion among collapsing formations. By August 1944, surrounded in the Falaise Pocket, Meyer ordered a breakout attempt. It was the last act of a commander fighting a lost war. Captured by Canadian troops shortly after, Meyer faced a military tribunal. He was accused of responsibility for the execution of prisoners of war by troops under his command. His trial, held in 1945, was one of the earliest to define the principle of command responsibility, that leaders could be held accountable for crimes committed by subordinates. Sentenced to death, his sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment. After nearly a decade behind bars in Canada and West Germany, he was released in 1954. Following his release, Meyer published his memoir, Grenadiers, which presented his perspective on the war, emphasizing duty, camaraderie, and tactical innovation, while avoiding ideological discussion. The book became popular among veterans, but also controversial for what it left unsaid. Meyer spent his final years in Germany, speaking at reunions and advocating for recognition of Waffen-SS veterans as soldiers rather than criminals. He died suddenly in 1961 at the age of 51, collapsing during a veterans gathering. His funeral drew thousands of former comrades, reflecting the complicated memory of those who had served under him. To historians, Kurt Meyer remains an enigma, a disciplined and capable officer, shaped by an ideology that demanded unconditional loyalty. His career highlights both the efficiency and the moral blindness that characterized much of the SS command structure. The story of Kurt Meyer is not simply that of one commander, but of an entire generation caught between conviction and catastrophe. His courage and tactical brilliance cannot be separated from the system that produced them, a system that turned war into ideology and duty into doctrine. Studying figures like Meyer is essential, not for glorification, but for understanding how ordinary ambition and discipline can be harnessed by destructive ideas. History's lesson is not confined to the battlefields of Normandy or the steppes of Ukraine. It speaks to every age where loyalty outweighs conscience and obedience replaces judgment. Remembering men like Kurt Meyer forces us to look beyond myth, to see how individual talent, when placed in service of a corrupt vision, can magnify tragedy. If you found this story insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. More untold stories from the past await you here.